Hi, this is Professor Nagel. I'm on the faculty of Concordia and teach business and economics, a lot of the international business classes. This talk is on the vocation of worker, and it's also about the virtue of being well-rounded. The term worker is a really broad heading, and certainly students work at their studies and many work part-time to help pay the bills. Um, and that obviously requires work. However, this chapter will move away from the broad vocational heading and carve out a focus on living honorably as a worker in life after university, when through God's grace, you will chart your own way in the world. So the purpose of this talk is to offer an approach to navigating the world of work and also to give some guidance for that journey. Perspective is offered here is that of a business professor and former corporate manager. But the truths of right and honorable behavior and the goal of living an ethical life, right, that crosses all disciplines. And we'll discuss how to prepare for the future and show the challenges to living an honorable life are not dissimilar to those faced in the days of Luther 500 years ago. So let's look down the road to life and career. And let's also presume you defer graduate school for a couple of years and secure a fine entry-level position. After an appropriate time of hard work in the trenches, learning and becoming acclimated to an industry, this could be solar power, this could be healthcare, or an institution, let's say the US State Department, you move into managing others. And here, though still a worker, you will lead and direct other subordinate workers. Life is all about preparation, transition, and the journey. And let's start with a great quote from Luther. And Luther said, "I shall say nothing here about the pure pleasure a person gets from having studied, to read all kinds of things, to talk and associate with educated people, and travel and do business in foreign lands." I just love this quote. It's a great quote. So here Luther sees the vocation of student leading to a full life of the mind, pushing broad horizons, and being out and about in the world, not in some cloister or monastery or sitting in a dorm room playing video games, right? Luther says that students should be prepared to, quote, take their place in the stream of human events. It's interesting to note that Luther's worldview included not only business, but international business. So let's go back and ask the question, what is business? There are many misconceptions about the role of business, lots of soap opera stuff, but one can say that businesses are employers, they are investors, they are polluters, they are producers and purveyors of products like wind turbines, iPhones, okay, and Subarus. Business can be a for-profit or a charitable not-for-profit, such as AmeriCares or Lutheran Social Services. A business is the accountant who does your taxes, the plumber who unclogs your drain, or the airline that carries you across a continent. And let's not forget the mining companies, okay? The mining companies that provide ore to the steel mills, that provide metal to the machinery companies, that make the milking powders used by dairy farmers so that all needy students can go out and buy their morning venti blonde lattes, all right? Everything connects, all right? So business affects all of our lives, and it's an arena in which most will have an active role. This reality leads to such questions as, how should we prepare ourselves, right, to navigate the mosaic of worker activities? What should be our core values? What should be our guiding lights? Okay, how should we lead others by example in right and honorable behavior? Part of the answer given by those with experience in business is that the best workers and the best managers are well-rounded, they are well-traveled, and they are well-read. Okay, having a narrow worldview or silo of knowledge, as it's called, okay, that's just simply not enough. The globally experienced journalist, Tom Friedman, notes the value of such well-roundedness. And another one of my favorite quotes, he says, "Today, more than ever, the traditional boundaries between politics, culture, technology, finance, national security, and ecology, those barriers are disappearing. You often cannot explain one without referring to the others, and you cannot explain the whole without reference to them all. In a world where we are so much more interconnected, the ability to read the connections and to connect the dots is the real value added. And if you don't see the connections, you won't see the world." This is really profound. I'm going to share a screen here and show the few images here. And we need to think through about connections and connecting the dots. And of course, who is this? Well, this is Mao. And kind of showing in this propaganda view the legacy of which he is claiming to be the beneficiary or the culmination of. And this is kind of fun. So we've got Mao here, right? But at the beginning we got Marx, we got Engels, and who's this guy, right? Well, right, that's Lenin, right? And then who's this guy? Well, that would be Stalin from Russia. Anyway, so this is, one needs to have a broad understanding of how we get to where we get to, because in the 20th century, a third of mankind actually lived in some form of Marxist-Leninist structure. Okay, so let's go to another image. And this is actually in Moscow. This is a meeting, the Department of Agriculture. I did some work with them after their dairy sector was failing. The point is, look on the wall. So this is after the fall of the Soviet Union to the more current era. And who's on the wall? Well, that's still Lenin. So I think that's kind of remarkable. And here we're going. Where are we going now? We're going to Vietnam. Okay, and so this is a picture of Ho Chi Minh, the father of modern Vietnam, and showing that he is in the line of succession or the legacy of who? Lenin. It's kind of remarkable. Again, the point here is to be connecting dots. Okay. Here's China. Obviously, this is the Forbidden City with a picture of Mao. This is Beijing, and Beijing with a showing the really awful air quality in that capital. That's China. This is also China. So this is this modern China. This is also China. This picture could have been taken 100 years ago. This is China again. And here's our friends at Walmart. And basically, which is a joint venture between China and a company in Arkansas. Vast majority of what Walmart sells comes from China. And now we go to beautiful part of China. Again, in my career, I spent quite a bit of time in China. This is in the south. This is on the Jade Green River Lee. These are iconic uh, called karst formations. This is absolutely stunningly beautiful place. I took Concordia students here a couple of years back. But then again, this is iconic China, and it's so iconic. Well, how iconic is it? It's so iconic, they put it onto their own currency. So this is who the Chinese also see themselves as part of who they are. Also, I want to put up a picture here. This is a picture that literally could have been taken 1,000 years ago. This is also on the River Lee, and where fishermen use cormorants, these large birds, to catch fish and therefore feed their families. The raft he's on is made obviously of bamboo, but again, we have modern China, and then we have the hinterlands. Okay. So we're, I think, in an interesting place, and thinking about cultures, thinking about how things do connect. Okay. From a corporate perspective, and to help students position themselves to be effective workers, in Luther's words, to take their place in the stream of human events, right? A friend and the CEO of Beam Suntory, the very large beverage company, he advises that, and I asked him to provide some advice. So here it is. He says, companies are increasingly interconnected between geographies and functional expertise. Innovations and big achievements are often born from the leverage of this interconnectedness, and successful employees are those who thrive in this cross-functional, cross-geographical network. Here's the key. Effective two-way communications, and more specifically, emphatic listening, is one of the key enablers. So to prepare students, putting extra emphasis on listening and more broadly communication skills is a very valuable complement to overseas studies, internships, and social experiences. In fact, you'll find the best marketers, the best international managers, really good at listening. They shut up, they watch, they observe, they draw people out. They just don't talk, they just don't run at the mouth. Okay. Another quote I want to give you, and this is someone who was reflecting on his own journey, and is a personal mentor of mine, and a former chair of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. He said, this is him speaking, he said, my success came from a generalist background in what I'll call political economy. Okay, and today, just separately here, economics as a discipline used to be called political economy. Okay, all right, so back to his quote. He says, there is a need for a global perspective and knowledge of other cultures. There is now a move away from intense specialization to a broader concept of leadership and a larger perspective of service to clients and service to society. Okay. These, what I've just quoted to you, these are truths, okay? And they really explain why the business faculty so value the core curriculum that's provided. In the liberal arts tradition, those who embrace diversity, okay, develop a breadth of knowledge and are able to connect the dots. They are then better able to bridge between disciplines, peoples, and cultures. And in business, this is a huge value added. Perhaps obvious, but knowledge of the world is fundamental. Yet in recent years, Faculty see students arriving on campus with increasingly less knowledge about their world. The sad reality is that given a map of the Middle East, okay, 31% of American students are unable to identify Israel. Okay, so going back to our little share screen here, there's our chap on the River Lee. But this is a slide of from our friends at Fox News, and just like so many people could not, 31% of Americans can't identify where Israel is in the Middle East. Also, Fox News can't do it. Well, they can identify Israel, but you can see here is where Egypt should be, and if you noticed, here's where they put Egypt. Not to beat up on Fox News, but you really ought to get this right. And Egypt here, right? And here's, well, we're going through a few things here, but Egypt is where the Suez Canal is. It's the most populous Arabic country. You ought to get this right. Okay. Also, when American students are asked to name the United States' largest trading partner, most get it wrong, saying that it's China. Only 10% give the correct answer of Canada, right? And on civic mindedness and the vocation of being a citizen, only 36% of Americans can name all three branches of government. I mean, this is pathetic, right? Only 36% of Americans can name the three branches of government. In some high schools, teachers have even told students they don't actually need to know anything. They just need to be able to find it online. This is just silly, right? As per Tom Friedman's perspective, if one doesn't even know that the dots exist, how can one hope to connect them, right? So happily, many students do pursue broad horizons, recognizing that globalization is upon us, a reality that we all must navigate. And no great surprise that in looking to the future, there is a clear need for globally minded workers, both in government and business. The director of 3M notes the great shortage of workers who are global trade literate. It's an area we absolutely address at Concordia, sensitive to foreign cultures and conversant in different languages. In any well-run business today, diversity is not seen as a problem to be managed, but a beneficial and competitive asset. Understanding the role of history and cultures is key. A friend, a chap called Paul Guilfoyle, directs a joint venture in Japan between Tropicana and Kirin Beverage. And he says he is as much a sociologist as a business person. Okay. I want to show another image here. This is one of my former students, Stéphane Laroche, just a superb student, went on to Tufts, went into the State Department, and now he's a foreign service officer in Abuja, Nigeria with USAID. Picture there is we're traveling in China, in Xi'an. This is called the Wild Goose Pagoda. It's over 1,000 years old. And again, the more international experiences you can develop and invest in yourself, the better. Okay. I asked Stefan from his work as a foreign service officer to comment on the vocational worker. And he said, quote, "In our work, colleagues at all echelons come from various corners of our nation and world. Together, when workers and leaders hold diversity and inclusion as foundational values, the organization benefits from the resulting diverse set of ideas. This then leads to innovations that directly help solve problems and so better serve society. Again, we're trying to trying to connect some dots here and look at the core curriculum that then will lead to international careers. It absolutely does. Okay. So want to now kind of reflect, and given the above, how best should students and anyone prepare themselves to be effective and productive workers in the larger world. Students in becoming workers should go out with good courage and engage the world, being confident in the biblical admonition, do not be afraid, just don't, okay? We all need to keep our horizons broad and be open and work with and enjoy the wonderful diversity of God's peoples. The world is a big place, okay? Only 4.4% of the world's population live in the United States. Everybody else ain't here, okay? However, in sad and ignorant contrast, right, we see today's politicians build their appeal with a demagogue's design on promoting fear of the foreign, the unfamiliar, and the immigrant. America is thus diminished. In a real-world comment, travel writer Rick Steves notes, fear is for people who don't get out very much. And this echoes the view of the American humorist, right, Mark Twain. Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. I'm going to say that again. Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. Okay. So get out there, right? Enjoy Ecuador. Even befriend an Italian. We have great Italians at Concordia. Okay. So let's now switch gears from positioning ourselves for life and career and look to the relevance of Martin Luther's writings on the vocation of worker, both in his day and our own. While the main focus of Luther's work is on the redemptive power of the gospel, his extensive writings include commentary on such work and business-related issues as pricing, free markets, cross-border trade, compound interest, monopolies, and the role of government. Unpacking all of these is, of course, beyond the scope of this short talk, but Luther's underlying view on our role as workers follows his theologically based approach of Nächstenliebe, German word Nächstenliebe, which loosely translates as the necessary love and care for those together with us in society, our fellow citizens, our neighbors. And to explain this approach, Luther said, when God in his sheer mercy and without any merit of mine has given me such unspeakable riches, shall I then not freely, joyously, wholeheartedly, unprompted, do everything that I know will please him? I will give myself as a sort of Christ to my neighbor, as Christ gave himself for me. The noted scholar Roland Baton calls this the epitome of Luther's ethic, that a Christian must be a Christ to his or her neighbor. Okay. Such Nächstenliebe should be our vocational aspiration. Yet we live in a fallen world, and we must stand strong when others push us to selfishness, greed, prejudice, and yes, the coarsening of daily discourse. A common example is those who don't discuss or argue an issue on the merits, but attack the appearance, the intelligence, or the ethnicity of the person making the argument. Such ad hominem attacks have absolutely no role in communal life or corporate life. Yet sadly, we see many go down that road. Okay, so now that given that we are called to take our place as workers in the world, we then need to prepare ourselves for the challenges we all face to living an honorable life of Nächstenliebe. So it's worthwhile here to give examples of those who strayed from that old honorable path. As noted, my discipline is business, so that will be the focus. In reality, most workers are regular folk who strive to live their lives and vocations with decency, taking care of their families, and participating in a faith community. American business is not all about Hollywood-style greedy villains, though there are some. Okay, so as a cautionary tale, let's take a look at temptation and greedy villains in both Luther's times and ours. And we should add that Luther did not single out business workers as the only ones driven by greed. He condemned greed in members of all classes, what he called Stände, and no profession is any greedier than any other. Nevertheless, here are examples from the dark side of business. In Luther's day, he keenly observed the detrimental effects of market manipulation and monopolies. In his commentary, Trade and Usury, Luther talks of economic coercion when a merchant takes advantage of customers to reap unfair profits, especially the manipulation brought on by monopoly power. And his concern remains every bit as valid today, as monopolies and market manipulations wreck the beneficial efficiency of free markets. This is what Luther would call the Gemeinmarkt, the common market. Luther notes here, quote, "There are some who buy up the entire supply of certain goods or wares in a country or city in order to have these goods entirely under their own control. They then fix and raise the price and sell them dear as they like or can. Even the imperial and secular laws forbid this. They call it monopolia. For such merchants act as if God's creatures and God's goods were created and given to them alone, as if they could take them from others and set on them whatever price they chose." Okay. Now, while in Luther's time, monopolies were illegal, the laws were not enforced against the great trading houses. And a case study from Luther's time is the Augsburg family of the Fuggers. They were a major banking house, and they held monopolies in mining and finance, with no legal limitations or competitive constraints. The Fuggers amassed a huge fortune. Okay, and this resonates with the really lamentable state of American politics today. The Fuggers made enormous cash outlays that secured the imperial election of Emperor Charles V, And that came with a quid pro quo that ensured that the authorities would not move against the elite Fuggers or limit their monopoly power. Luther was disgusted with the connivance of the secular, political, and religious powers, and was surely including the Fuggers when he condemned the great, powerful arch-thieves with whom lords and princes consort and who daily plunder not just a city or two, but all Germany. These are harsh words but for a harsh, corrupt, and abusive time. However, Luther's underlying social concern, which was motivated both by reason's natural law and faith's love toward one's neighbor in response to Christ's love, it all remains quite instructive. Pricing and trade should be market driven and at the same time not exploitive or coercive. Freely fluctuating prices in a competitive marketplace are a necessary and beneficial underpinning of a market. The role of business and trade can and should be to improve the quality of life in society. Both parties, right, the buyer and the seller, should gain from the exchange, perhaps in not some elegant, pristine theoretical balance, but trade should lead to mutual benefit. Also, when commenting on the commandment, thou shalt not steal, Luther gives a harsh admonition to workers that theft is, quote, taking advantage of our neighbors in any sort of dealings that result in loss to them by deception and sharp practices and crafty dealings. Luther called many merchants Stuhlräuber, okay, seated thieves, Stuhlräuber, okay, and quote, far from being petty picklocks and sneak thieves who pilfer the cash box, they sit in their chairs and are known as great lords and honorable, upstanding citizens, or they rob and steal under the cloak of legality. Okay. Luther adds for us as workers a core ethic that all people should know then that is their duty on pain of God's displeasure, not to harm our neighbors, but to take advantage of them or to defraud them by any faithless or underhanded business transaction. Much more than that, they are also obligated faithfully to protect their neighbor's property and to promote and further their interests. Okay. Moving now to our world today, we can readily connect Luther's admonition against sharp practices and crafty dealings, so a direct Luther quote, with the private sector-induced market meltdown in 2008. This was a time when many U.S. financial houses succumbed to avarice and greed, knowing full well that what they did was unsustainable. Abusing a trusted role in society, many bankers and financiers, what Luther called geistige Blasen, it's not very nice. Geistige Blasen means a greedy, bloated fellow. So these geistige Blasen grew recklessly wealthy, and their behavior in the United States in 2008 became so profitable that while driving the U.S. economy into ruin, financial sector profits spiked to over 40% of the profits in the entire U.S. economy, 40%. This compares to the financial sector's average profits from 1970 to 2000 of 20.2%. Okay. Now, does anybody want to argue that financial services contribute 40% of the well-being of our country? Okay. Key poster children of this nonsense are the managers at the failed Lehman Brothers in New York. They absolutely knew their actions were dangerous and added risk not only to their company, but to society at large. Yet, the geistige Blasen, right, the greedy, bloated fellows, the geistige Blasen would get theirs. Okay. Their attitude was, let's get our cash out, park in T-bills, and let the thing crash. In layman, this was called IBG, YBG. No kidding. When a middle-level manager approached his boss with this concern that what the firm was doing was wrong and unsustainable, the response was, don't worry, IBG, YBG. I'll be gone, and you'll be gone. The firm was led by Richard Fuld, who, while flying his company into failure and helping crater the U.S. economy, got his, taking out earnings of $71.9 million. Tragically, greed and avarice prevailed with a pathetic lack of next and lever. They had lost their ethical rudder, chasing money, turning their backs on the foundational guideposts in Mark's gospel: do not steal, do not bear false witness, do not defraud. Okay. By the way, if any of you study business and economics at Concordia, I can guarantee that you can become a millionaire. I can do that. I can guarantee this. So how can I do that? Here we go. This is actually a real currency. This is from Zimbabwe. And I have friends that send me currency from around the world. Anyway, so this is a note for 250 million. So making $1 million, you shouldn't be too big a switch. Okay. So where do we go from here, and how can we benefit from the caring perspective of the great reformer? Clearly, we all need to carry Luther's theologically rooted perspective and understanding of ethical moorings in these really difficult times of economic change and transition. Luther's legacy is an emphasis that our focus as workers, as economic agents, should not be a simple impersonal calculus. It should be one that incorporates fairness to others as a guide and constraint, and doing much more than what is simply legal. Markets and legalities should not have the final say in determining our actions or our natures or our neighbor's welfare. So decide who you are, yeah, and decide where you stand. Prepare yourself for your career, but how are you going to proceed? Finally, the appropriate admonition for us all, especially you who are society's rising cohort of workers and managers, is to consider your impact on others with whom you will deal. And follow Luther's Nächstenliebe, the necessary love and care for those together with you in society, your fellow citizens, your neighbors. Your neighbor's needs and Christ's love call you to work this way. I'm now going to close with a short video that was put together by CUI students from a recent business and culture immersion trip that the business program put together in Japan. And hope you enjoy it, and know that it's a big world out there. Again, decide who you are and how you're going to approach it. Don't just sit in SoCal. Okay. Wish you well.